Hashtag the collapse, extended. Maxwell Sterling's heart stopped beating at exactly 2:17 p.m. on a crowded Manhattan sidewalk. As the 38-year-old tech billionaire crumpled to the ground, his Italian leather briefcase spilling open to reveal classified documents about his company's impending bankruptcy, not a single person stopped to help. Pedestrians stepped around his convulsing body, some filming with their phones, others averting their eyes as if his misfortune might be contagious. 15 seconds without oxygen. 30 seconds. His brain cells beginning to die one by one. Move. I'm a nurse. A woman's voice cut through the crowd as Emma Chen dropped her grocery bags and fell to her knees beside him. Her fingers pressed against his neck found no pulse, his lips already turning blue. Call 911, she shouted to the circle of bystanders who'd finally stopped to watch. As Emma began chest compressions, she noted the expensive suit, the platinum watch worth more than her annual salary, and wondered why someone so clearly wealthy was being left to die on a dirty sidewalk. What she didn't know was that Maxwell Sterling, featured on Forbes' cover just last month, had lost everything that morning and was now technically worth less than she was. 7 minutes without proper oxygen would mean permanent brain damage. Emma hadn't broken rhythm once, sweat beading on her forehead as she fought to restart a stranger's heart. The crowd had grown, phones recording her desperate attempts to save him. His eyelids fluttered. A gasp escaped his lips. Then his eyes shot open, locking with hers as his hand gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "The documents," he whispered. "Don't let them see." The approaching sirens drowned out his words to everyone but her. The ambulance ride was a blur of activity, 4 lines, oxygen masks, and urgent radio transmissions. Emma had insisted on riding along after Maxwell had refused to release her hand. "Stay," he'd pleaded, and something in his eyes, fear, yes, but something else too, had made it impossible to refuse. The EMTs worked around her, eyebrows raised at the unusual arrangement. Maxwell drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time his eyes opened, they sought hers first. The billionaire's secrets were safe with her for now, but Emma couldn't stop wondering what could possibly be worth dying for. In the hospital waiting room, Emma stared at the briefcase she'd impulsively grabbed during the commotion. She hadn't opened it, medical ethics and basic human decency prevented that, but its weight felt significant in her lap. A nurse's aide approached, clipboard in hand. "Family?" she asked, eyeing Emma skeptically. Emma hesitated. She was nobody to this man, just a bystander who'd done what anyone with her training should have done. But something made her say, "I'm all he has right now." The words felt strangely true. Maxwell Sterling hadn't always been alone. Born to middle-class parents in Detroit, his early life had been remarkably ordinary until his coding prodigy emerged at 14. By 23, he'd founded Sterling Technologies with his college roommate, Vincent Keller. Their friendship had been the stuff of Silicon Valley legend, the visionary and the businessman, complementary forces driving innovation. Until 3 years ago, when Vincent died in what the media called a yachting accident. Maxwell never believed it was an accident, especially after finding discrepancies in the company finances the very next day. When Maxwell regained consciousness 12 hours later, Emma was dozing in the visitor's chair. "You stayed," he murmured, his voice rough with disuse. Emma startled awake, immediately moving to check his vitals. "Professional habit," she explained, though they both knew it was more than that. "Your briefcase is secure." His eyes darted to the corner where she'd stashed it, relief evident. "They'll be looking for it," he said cryptically. "And now they'll be looking for you too." The heart monitor betrayed his anxiety, beeping faster. "Who's looking?" Emma asked, already suspecting she'd stepped into something dangerous. Maxwell's gaze was haunted when he answered, "The people who killed my best friend. The people who will kill me next if I don't stop them first." 3 weeks later, Emma pushed through the revolving doors of Sterling Tower, clutching the small box of personal items Maxwell had asked her to collect from his hospital room. Security had been expecting her, whisking her into a private elevator that shot up 90 floors without stopping. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawled below like a circuit board. Maxwell stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. "You saved my life," he said without turning. "And now I need you to help me save 20,000 others." What Maxwell revealed next left Emma breathless. Sterling Technologies, employer of thousands and backbone of the American tech sector, was being systematically destroyed from within. Corporate sabotage, blackmail, and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government, all documented in the papers that had spilled from his briefcase that day. "I was on my way to the FBI when my heart gave out," he explained, finally turning to face her. The confident billionaire from magazine covers was gone, replaced by a man whose eyes held equal measures of determination and defeat. "I need someone I can trust, someone they aren't watching. I need you, Emma." The security monitors behind him flickered to life, showing surveillance footage of Emma's apartment building, her parents' home in Queens, even her sister's college dorm. "They're already watching you too." Emma's first instinct was to run, far from this man and his dangerous world. She was just Emma Chen, 34, daughter of Chinese immigrants who'd sacrificed everything for her education. She'd become a nurse to heal people, not to fight corporate conspiracies. Her life was grounded in the tangible, the 12-hour shifts at Mount Sinai, her small circle of friends, the weekend calls with her parents where she assured them she was fine despite the perpetual exhaustion in her voice. She had never sought adventure or wealth, finding purpose instead in the quiet moments at patients' bedsides. "Why me?" she finally asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Maxwell gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Because you stopped when no one else would. Because you had every opportunity to look through that briefcase but didn't. Because..." He hesitated, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Because when I woke up and saw you there, I knew somehow that I could trust you." The irony wasn't lost on Emma, that a man whose wealth was built on technological innovation was now basing the most important decision of his life on pure instinct. Emma's life transformed overnight. From 12-hour hospital shifts to clandestine meetings with federal agents, from her modest Brooklyn apartment to the secure panic room beneath Maxwell's Hamptons estate. Their partnership was professional at first, the billionaire and the nurse united by circumstance and common enemies. But as weeks became months, something shifted between them. Maybe it was the night Maxwell talked her through a panic attack when the pressure became too much. Maybe it was when Emma stayed by his bedside during a fever that brought back nightmares from his childhood. Or perhaps it was simply inevitable, two people seeing each other at their most vulnerable, their most authentic. The investigation consumed them both. Maxwell's technical expertise coupled with Emma's observational skills proved a formidable combination. She brought a different perspective, noticing human details his data-driven mind overlooked. In the field, her medical training provided perfect cover for surveillance operations. "You see people," Maxwell told her one night as they pored over financial records. "I've spent years looking at numbers, algorithms, market trends. But you see the human element I've been blind to." His hand brushed hers as he reached for a document, the contact brief but electric. Emma learned that Maxwell's heart condition, the one that had caused his collapse, was congenital, exacerbated by years of stress and neglected health. "The great irony," he confessed one evening, "is that I've made billions developing health monitoring technology, yet couldn't be bothered to monitor my own." Emma instituted mandatory breaks, proper meals, and meditation sessions despite his initial protests. She watched as color returned to his face, as the dark circles beneath his eyes faded. He was healing in more ways than one. Their first major breakthrough came when Emma recognized a name on a shell company document, the attending physician who had signed Vincent Keller's death certificate. The same doctor had recently purchased a villa in the Maldives worth millions, far beyond a medical examiner's salary. This thread, once pulled, began to unravel the entire conspiracy. Board members were secretly selling company secrets. Government contracts were being manipulated. And at the center was Senator Howard Reeves, whose re-election campaigns had been generously funded by Sterling Technologies under Maxwell's direction. "Why did no one help you that day?" Emma asked him one evening as they reviewed encrypted files on the patio overlooking the Atlantic. The question had haunted her since that first moment on the sidewalk. Maxwell's hand stilled on the keyboard, his expression closing like a door being shut. "Because I deserved it," he said finally. "Because I've spent my life becoming the kind of man people step over." Before she could respond, the security system blared. Red lights flashed throughout the property. "They found us," Maxwell said, grabbing her hand as they ran for the safe room. The doors sealed behind them just as the first explosion rocked the foundation of the house. For 72 hours, they remained locked in the reinforced chamber, surviving on emergency rations and bottled water. 3 days of uncertainty, of whispered conversations and shared fears. 3 days in which the lines between ally and something more blurred beyond recognition. "If we survive this," Maxwell said on the third night, his voice barely audible in the darkness, "I want to be someone worth saving." Emma's hand found his in the dark. "You already are," she whispered back. As dawn broke on the fourth day, the satellite phone they'd nearly given up on finally rang. "It's over," said the voice on the other end. "We got them all." Emma still remembered the moment they emerged from the safe room, blinking in the harsh daylight filtering through the partially collapsed mansion. Maxwell had paused, surveying the destruction of his once pristine home, and laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound she'd never heard from him before. "Nothing left," he'd said, still smiling. She hadn't understood until he explained, every possession, every artifact of his former life obliterated. "It feels like freedom." He'd taken her hand then, as FBI agents picked through the rubble around them. The evidence Maxwell had gathered led to the arrest of 17 corporate executives, 4 senators, and a network of international players who'd conspired to manipulate global markets. Sterling Technologies was saved, along with the livelihoods of thousands of employees. Maxwell became an unlikely hero, the billionaire who risked everything to expose corruption. But as reporters clamored for interviews and social media exploded with the story, he remained conspicuously absent from public view. Rumors swirled, he'd fled the country, he was in witness protection, he'd suffered complications from his cardiac event. What no one knew was that Maxwell had retreated to a small cabin in the Adirondacks, a property listed under Emma's grandfather's name. Here, away from the chaos, Maxwell confronted the man he'd become and the man he wanted to be. Emma visited when she could, bringing supplies and news from the outside world. These visits grew longer, the goodbyes harder. They'd saved each other's lives in different ways, creating a bond neither fully understood but both increasingly relied upon. On one such visit, she arrived to find Maxwell sitting on the porch, surrounded by notebooks filled with his precise handwriting. "I'm redesigning everything," he told her, eyes bright with purpose. "The company structure, the profit-sharing model, even our core mission. What had started as a tech company would be transformed into something with human impact at its center. Healthcare accessibility," he explained as Emma settled beside him. "Starting with cardiac care in underserved communities." His hand found hers, a gesture that had become natural between them. "What do you think?" "I think Vincent would be proud," she said softly, knowing how the memory of his friend still haunted him. Maxwell nodded, emotion catching in his throat. "He always said I'd lost my way, that I'd forgotten why we started the company in the first place." He was right. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors no wealth could purchase. "I've been thinking about what you said too," he continued, "about why no one stopped to help me that day." Emma waited, knowing he needed space for these difficult truths. "I created a culture of selfishness, Emma. At my company, in my personal life. I valued efficiency over humanity. Why would anyone stop for a man who'd never stopped for anyone else?" 6 months after the sidewalk collapse, Emma sat alone in a small cafe in her old neighborhood. Her life had changed in ways she was still processing. The substantial reward money remained untouched in her account, blood money, as she sometimes thought of it, though Maxwell insisted she deserved every penny. She'd returned to nursing, finding comfort in the routine of helping others in straightforward, uncomplicated ways. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and she looked up to see Maxwell standing there, almost unrecognizable in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. No security detail, no designer watch. Just a man holding a small wrapped package. "I sold the company," he said without preamble, sliding into the seat across from her. "All of it. The buildings, the patents, the investments." Emma's shock must have shown on her face because he smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one from magazine covers. The board named it the Sterling Sacrifice in their press release. Apparently, giving up 98% of your net worth to ensure your employees keep their jobs and benefits makes you some kind of saint. He pushed the package toward her. "This is for you. Open it." Inside was a simple leather-bound journal. Emma flipped through the pages, confused by the handwritten entries until she recognized the dates, beginning with the day of his collapse. "I've spent my life accumulating wealth and power, convinced they were the same as security and happiness," Maxwell explained. "When my heart stopped that day, do you know what my last thought was? Not my accomplishments or possessions. I thought, no one will really miss me." His eyes met hers across the table. "And then you appeared. The one person who saw value in me beyond what I owned or controlled." The journal was his road to redemption, a record of lessons learned and changes made. The final pages described his plans for a new foundation focused on accessible healthcare and medical research. "I need a partner," he said, reaching for her hand across the table. "Someone to keep me accountable, to remind me what really matters. Someone who sees people at their worst and still believes they can be their best." The question hung unspoken between them, along with all they'd been through together. Emma looked down at their joined hands, then back at the face of the man she'd saved twice now, once from death and once from himself. What Maxwell couldn't know was how much he'd saved Emma too. For years, she'd been going through the motions, convinced that her small acts of care were enough to constitute a life. The daughter who always called, the nurse who never complained about extra shifts, the friend who listened but rarely shared her own struggles. Helping Maxwell had awakened something dormant inside her, a hunger for meaning beyond the everyday, a desire to create change on a scale she'd never imagined possible. "Partners," she agreed, turning her hand to interlace their fingers. As they walked out of the cafe together, neither the billionaire nor the nurse any longer but simply two people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, Maxwell stopped at the doorway. "You know what still amazes me?" he asked, his voice soft with wonder. "Of all the people on that sidewalk that day, you were the only one who stopped. If you hadn't..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma smiled up at him, understanding all he couldn't say. "Some connections are meant to be," she replied. "Sometimes the universe puts the right people in your path at exactly the moment you need them most." 1 year later, the Sterlingshire Foundation opened its first cardiac care clinic in Detroit, just blocks from where Maxwell had grown up. Emma directed the medical programs while Maxwell handled the technology and funding. Their model was revolutionary, combining cutting-edge remote monitoring with community-based care teams. When patients couldn't afford treatment, they received it anyway. When transportation was an issue, the foundation provided it. They addressed the whole person, not just the disease. On the clinic's opening day, Maxwell found Emma in a quiet moment, watching from the sidelines as patients filled the waiting room. "Vincent would have loved this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He always said technology should serve people, not the other way around." Emma squeezed his hand in silent understanding. Maxwell had erected a small plaque in the lobby dedicated to his friend, the final step in laying old ghosts to rest. That evening, as they walked hand in hand through the city that had shaped Maxwell's earliest years, he stopped suddenly beneath a streetlight. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. About us. About what happens next. Emma waited, her heart quickening. We've built something important together, he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the clinic several blocks behind them. But I find myself thinking more about building a life together. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing not a ring as she half expected, but a small, worn house key. My parents' old home. I bought it back last month. It needs work, but... He trailed off, uncertainty in his eyes. Emma took the key, understanding its significance. This wasn't about property or possessions. This was Maxwell Sterling, once defined by skyscrapers bearing his name, offering her something infinitely more valuable, his future, his trust, his heart. Yes, she said simply, closing her fingers around the key. His smile in that moment was worth more than all the billions he'd once possessed. 3 years after that fateful day on the sidewalk, Maxwell and Emma stood together on the steps of their 5th clinic opening, this one in Queens, just blocks from where Emma had grown up. The Sterlington model had become a blueprint for healthcare innovation nationwide, with medical journals publishing studies on their remarkable patient outcomes. What had begun as one man's redemption and one woman's compassion had blossomed into a movement. Dr. Chen Sterling? A young resident approached Emma nervously. The governor's here for the ribbon cutting. Emma nodded, straightening her lab coat. The medical degree she'd finally pursued with Maxwell's encouragement hung framed in their home office beside his engineering patents, equals in their different expertise. Maxwell appeared at her side, their 6-month-old daughter Violet nestled against his chest in a carrier. He'd insisted on being the primary caregiver while Emma completed her medical training, discovering a patience and gentleness within himself he never knew existed. "Ready?" he asked, free hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. Before Emma could answer, an elderly man approached them, tears in his eyes. "I just wanted to thank you both," he said, voice wavering. "I wouldn't be alive today if not for your clinic in Detroit." He gestured to the young woman beside him. "My granddaughter here, she's starting nursing school because of what you've built." Emma felt Maxwell's hand tighten around hers. Later that night, after the speeches and champagne toasts, after putting Violet to bed in their modest brownstone, Emma found Maxwell sitting on their rooftop garden, staring at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, settling beside him on the bench they'd built together. "I was thinking about that sidewalk," he said quietly. "How sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead to everything good that follows." He turned to her, moonlight silvering his features. "I never told you, but the moment before I collapsed, I was considering ending it all. The conspiracy, the betrayals, losing Vincent, it felt insurmountable. I thought the world would be better without another corrupt billionaire." His voice caught. "And then my heart decided for me." Emma leaned into him, her head finding the familiar spot on his shoulder. "The universe has strange ways of saving us from ourselves," she murmured. Below them, sirens wailed, another emergency, another life hanging in balance. But tonight, they weren't running toward danger or racing against conspiracies. Tonight, they were just Maxwell and Emma, witnesses to the profound truth that sometimes all it takes to change a life, or many lives, is one person willing to stop when everyone else walks by. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Getting involved that day? All you've given up?" Emma thought of her former life, the predictable routines, the limited horizons, the safety of anonymity. Then she thought of their daughter sleeping downstairs, the thousands of patients their foundation had helped, the man beside her who had transformed from stranger to partner to family. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. "Some people go their whole lives without finding their purpose. I found mine the moment I knelt beside you on that sidewalk." The lights of New York twinkled below them, each one representing a life, a story, possibilities unknown. Maxwell wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer against the autumn chill. "I love you, Emma Chen," he whispered, the words still new enough to feel sacred between them. "And I love you, Maxwell Sterling," she replied, the declaration as natural as the beating of their hearts, his mended, hers expanded, both forever changed by a single moment of compassion on a crowded city street. 10 years later, on the exact spot where Maxwell had collapsed, a bronze plaque gleamed in the afternoon sun. The Sterlington Initiative, where one person stopped. Below was a QR code leading to their worldwide network of clinics, research facilities, and community health programs. What had begun with one clinic in Detroit had expanded to 43 locations across 4 continents, pioneering a healthcare model that governments and private institutions were now racing to replicate. Maxwell, his hair now streaked with silver at the temples, stood hand in hand with Emma, watching as their 12-year-old daughter Violet unveiled the memorial. Behind them, their 7-year-old twins, Vincent and Lily, squirmed impatiently in their formal clothes. Media cameras flashed, capturing the family that had become synonymous with healthcare revolution. "This marks not just a personal milestone," Emma addressed the crowd, her confidence as a public speaker long since developed, but a reminder that moments of crisis are also moments of choice. Each of us has the power to walk by, or to stop. Later, at the gala celebrating their foundation's decade of work, an unexpected guest approached their table. Senator Howard Reeves, released after serving 7 years for his role in the conspiracy, stood before them, aged considerably by his time in prison. "Dr. Chin Sterling, Mr. Sterling," he acknowledged, discomfort evident in his rigid posture. "I came to say something I should have said years ago. I'm sorry." The word seemed to cost him physically. "What you've built, it's remarkable. More than we deserved after what we tried to do." Maxwell studied the man who had once orchestrated his downfall. Emma felt his hand tense in hers, then gradually relax. "Thank you for coming, Howard," Maxwell said simply. "Would you like to see what we're planning next?" The former senator's surprise was evident as Maxwell pulled out a chair for him. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Emma marveled at her husband's capacity for growth. "I never thought I'd see you voluntarily speaking with Reeves again," she said, watching him through the mirror as she removed her earrings. Maxwell smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. 10 years ago, I wanted justice. 5 years ago, I wanted him to see what good we'd accomplished despite him. Today, I realized I just want him to help if he can." He moved behind her, hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "You taught me that, you know. That redemption isn't reserved for special people. It's available to anyone willing to stop and help another human being." Emma turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "Do you remember what you wrote in that journal you gave me? About how no one would miss you if you were gone?" The question was rhetorical, they both knew those words by heart now. "Look at what we've built, Maxwell. Look at our children. Look at the millions of lives touched because your heart stopped that day and mine recognized it needed saving." Maxwell pulled her close, their foreheads touching in the intimate gesture that had become their silent language over the years. "I used to think my legacy would be in technology or wealth," he murmured. "But now I know it's in the ripples we create when we care enough to act. In our children. In the people who visit our clinics and leave determined to help others in turn." Through their bedroom window, the Manhattan skyline glittered, the same view that had once represented power and achievement to Maxwell now simply the backdrop to a life rebuilt on different values. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, funding battles, research setbacks, the constant push against a healthcare system resistant to change. But tonight, they stood together, testament to what becomes possible when one person stops on a crowded sidewalk and sees not a stranger, but a human being worth saving. Outside, autumn leaves swirled around them as they walked hand in hand down the street, past hurrying pedestrians too busy with their own lives to notice the former billionaire and the nurse who had saved him in every way a person can be saved. Their story wasn't over, in many ways, it was just beginning. But one chapter had closed, the one where wealth defined worth and status determined who deserved compassion. In its place was a simpler truth that perhaps those watching this story might take to heart, that the moments we stop for each other are the ones that truly define us. If this story moved you, remember that small acts of kindness can change lives in ways we may never fully understand. The world needs more people willing to stop when others walk by. Be that person whenever you can.